right, everyone, we are back aboard the Ebon Hawk, and we are headed on our way to our next location, or groups of locations, here for our KOTOR 2 travel logs. So Brian and Cassia are here with you to take you on this journey. It's going to be bouncing around a little bit, right, Cassia? Because we've already been everywhere that we need to go, but we have to go back to some of those places.
So we have to go back there again.
That's right. Yeah, we have some unfinished business, some loose ends, and some other stuff we wanted to talk about here as we kind of get into the end sections of KOTOR 2. But before we set off to our first destination, we just stumbled across something. It is in the broom closet of the Ebon Hawk, and that is the remains of HK-47.
Yeah, he is the interesting droid from KOTOR 1 that says all sorts of funny things, and then they brought him back for KOTOR 2.
That's right. Yeah, apparently, after the events of KOTOR 1, HK-47 is traveling around but gets separated from Revan at some point and ends up back on board the Ebon Hawk with T3 there. But unfortunately for HK, is he's not all there. All of his bits and bobs are gone, and part of the game is restoring HK-47 to his former glory, and thusly Mitra Surik becomes the new master of everyone's favorite assassin droid.
Yeah, and it was interesting to rebuild him. It's kind of like a quest on top of your other quests.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. And one of the reoccurring themes, or not themes, I guess, but one of the things that keeps happening throughout KOTOR 2 are these new batch of HK-50s that keep coming around and trying to kill us kind of at every turn. Every place we go, they seem to show up, and that kind of annoys HK-47 because he finds it very insulting that they would have ever updated his model. As we all know, HK-47 is the creme de la creme of assassin droids, and I always just thought that was kind of funny that it would irritate him that they'd replaced his model. And one of kind of my favorite just parts, I guess, of HK-47's story in KOTOR 2 is that you have HK, you have T3, and you've got Godo there, and they all just kind of bicker at one another. Plus Bowder's little droid, and they all just none of the droids really seem to get along that well, and I always just thought that was kind of fun.
Yeah. It's not really like R2-D2 and C-3PO. They just all don't get along.
That's right, yeah. And especially since Godo, G-O-T-O, we still never settled on how we were going to say that, was the one that commissioned these HK-50s to be built in the first place. So definitely some turmoil there, but it is important that we have HK-47 in the party for sure as we go, because there's still some important things that we need to do, Cassia. So like I mentioned, we have been everywhere that we need to go, but we're going to be going back to a couple places, and the first one is we're going to be going back to Duxon and Onderon, because there are some loose ends there we need to tie up. Now, you don't have to do this in the game. This is kind of an optional thing if you go back, but it does, kind of create some more of story elements and things like that. So it's kind of fun to go back there and get some more of this story. But what can you tell us about what we have to wrap up on Duxon and Onderon, Cassia?
We have to settle the General Valclu and Queen Talia feud because they're not getting along.
Yeah, they're not getting along. Yeah, if you remember from our first trip there, it's kind of a very politicized and polarized situation that's going on here in Onderon. And kind of depending on what path you take, either light side or dark side is going to play in on which side of this conflict you step into, and whose side you take in that. So that's kind of interesting. And then also on Duxon and Onderon, we are going to a Sith tomb. Now, presumably, this is the tomb of Freedon Nad, which is a story that we get in the original Tales of the Jedi comic line, which we've talked about here on the show before.
Yeah, and that's an interesting tomb to go to, and Darth Bane will visit the tomb later.
That's right, yeah, and then the Darth Bane trilogy of books, that is one of the places that Darth Bane goes, as he is, accumulating his power and knowledge of the dark side of the Force. So that's some pretty interesting stuff there, and that's kind of the last thing you get to decide to do in Knights of the Old Republic. After this point, T3 has decided where the Ebon Hawk is going to go. You're going to go there, whether you like it or not, because we are in the end game. So before we do that, before we press go on this hyperdrive, Cassie, is there anything else that we missed in KOTOR 2 that we want to address before we head off to start our end section of the story?
So I got a question from Marius on Discord.
Okay.
And he says, considering the Darksaber has essentially replaced the EU's Mask of Mandalore as a form of crowning Excalibur, how would the reemergence of the Darksaber in the possession of Canderous Ordo, Mandalore as of KOTOR 2, be seen by others in the galaxy? The question, he goes on to say, the question might be complicated of asking whether Revan used the Darksaber after slaying Mandalore as well. Symbol of the Sith and all that jazz. And then Han Solo, the real Han Solo, so it must be, Harrison Ford commenting, says, make the Darksaber at least 4,000 years old. Might complicate things if Terra Vizsla lived only 1,000 years before Rebels. I might be wrong of the time gap, but it would be interesting if Canderous or Revan wielded the Darksaber. What do you think?
Yeah, that would be interesting, and it would be interesting to think of that as the piece of power and not as the Mask of Mandalore being that kind of symbol of who's leading. So that would be really interesting. It's it'd be interesting to think of if Revan would have had the Darksaber. Perhaps that could be because we know that Darth Revan, carried the two. He had his red saber and his purple saber. So maybe there's something to do with that, or maybe Vizsla recrafted the Darksaber from the Kyber crystal from Revan. Maybe that's how you kind of skirt around that issue there, where it was kind of the source of power. And maybe the civilization of the Mandalorians didn't really understand what that was, but Revan did, and then it was recrafted into what we see as the modern day equivalent there in the Darksaber. But what about you? What do you think? How do you kind of reconcile that if that were going to be the case?
I would kind of think that the Mandalorians would have different relics, like masks are so important to them, so I could see a mask being important. A Darksaber is interesting. Maybe there's been multiple Darksabers reforged, But I don't know, Marius went on to ask, another question might be exploring what kind of monuments Mandalorians might have built to mark their conquests. If so, what would they be? What does a peacetime rebuilding Mandalore such as Canderous do? I don't know. How do you think they would mark their triumphs?
I don't know for sure. I think that if you are going to kind of associate it with sort of like a real world kind of a thing, what did the Romans do as they were moving and spreading out? They basically just established cities and their images and just kind of held control that way. It was kind of a monument through expansion. So maybe that, the Mandalorians don't strike me as the kind of people that would be building big statues or places of worship or things like that, being kind of this more warring type of nation. I think it's just moving and spreading out and establishing strongholds on these places that you've been to and given conquest to. But I don't know. And then as far as during a peacetime sort of thing, what does Canderous do? What does he get up to and spend his time doing? Certainly, when we're there at the camp, they're still going through the motions of training and fighting and things like that. But probably always itching for a little bit of adventure, probably in some sort of fashion. But I don't know. What do you think about that, Cassia?
I don't know. Do I see them creating the Arc de Triomphe or anything? Probably not, but I do see them commemorating their conquests. But I think it's hard for Mandalorians to be at peace. But maybe they would be like, okay, we're gonna like create some artwork and architecture to commemorate our history. So that would be interesting to see. But fun fact about the original Mask of Mandalore, I didn't know this. It was constructed out of the bones of a mythosaur.
Oh, okay.
So like, I learned that from Theo on Discord, and it's a symbol of victory. So.
Oh, there you go. Very cool. Yeah, but you could definitely play around with a lot of different Mandalorian, items and relics and things like that. Kind of in current canon, we're getting a lot of things that are taking place, revolving around like Beskar and the collection of that, precious metal and things like that. So yeah, it could have been the same, back to that, or something that was used to craft weapons and ancient weapons and things like that. Because yeah, ultimately it's more of a symbol than an actual tool. So to see how that might have changed over the course of history is kind of interesting and kind of a fun thing to lay out and think through for sure.
Yeah. So there's our love letter to Duxon and Onderon, and yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, absolutely. So thanks for sharing that and giving us something to think about there. Now I'm going to be thinking about that all day, but I don't really have time to think about that too much because we have a lot of important stuff to do. And first things first, Cassia, we found all of the Jedi. Or, depending on if you're dark side, you might have had some encounters with the Jedi. But, we went light side. We're pretty nice people, by and large. So we're going back to Dantooine to reunite with all the Jedi Masters that kicked us out of the Order in the first place.
What could go wrong?
What could go wrong indeed? That's right, yeah. So we get back to Dantooine. They are in the Jedi Enclave. It's being rebuilt, and we go and confront them. And basically, the Jedi Masters say, we kicked you out. We were right to do so. And now you keep coming around. We're going to cut you off from the Force. And that's what they do. But luckily, or unluckily, I guess, depending on how you look at it, we have a companion with us by the name of Kreia who does not take too kindly to that.
Yeah, and before they can really cut Mitra Surik off from the Force again, Kreia just comes onto the scene and cuts them off from life, I guess. So
yeah, that's right. Well, it depends. I think if you do light side, I think she just kind of incapacitates them. But I think if you're dark side, then yeah, she takes them out for sure. But both. Kind of the results are kind of the same. They're not able to get you fully cut off from the Force, but it does explain some things as to why Kreia was able to talk to us kind of through our head through this whole time. Is she had this link to us, and that's really what on the light side, what they're trying to sever is Kreia being able to communicate with us in that way. So I think that stuff is pretty interesting and kind of a neat way to kind of put a cap on that story that revolved around finding, the missing Jedi. Where did the scattered Jedi go? And it, kind of gives some closure to that story of Mitra Surik, even though it's, probably not very fulfilling. You expect you play through this whole game. You find the Jedi Masters and, you expect to kind of be welcomed back into the Order with open arms, but no, they pretty much stick to their guns, right? They say, no, we made our decision and we stand by it. You are not right to have the Force. So
yeah, the prequel Jedi and the KOTOR Jedi Council would probably get along with each other.
That's right. Yeah, they could compare notes. And yeah, definitely have some good ideas for how to run things poorly. So so that is what we have to do on Dantooine. So either way, light side, dark side, we go there, we meet them, and then we're off to our next destination here, and that is we're headed back to Telos to meet up with an old friend. Over a pumpkin spice latte at Starbucks. We're gonna go have a drink, share some good times. Maybe get into a fight because you've been hanging out with Sith holocrons all day.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it. But you get to take down Atris, who I don't know. Atris is so interesting. It would have been interesting to have her as a companion, which was the original plan. But she ends up, like, turning to the dark side because she was so worried about the dark side, and kind of is revealed to be, like, hypocrite's a strong word, but she kind of is one, so.
Yeah, moral of the story, don't isolate yourself with a bunch of bad, dark, evil knowledge, because it's going to rub off on you for sure. So yeah, Atris becomes the new iteration of Darth Treya, the Queen of Betrayal, which is, it's kind of fascinating from a standpoint where, you know, she flees, obviously, when, you know, Dantooine is under attack, and she goes and she's trying to kind of rebuild or begin, you know, kind of a new Jedi enclave, and she starts accumulating all of this, you know, Sith artifacts and materials and holocrons and things like that to study from and to learn from. But, you know, ultimately, yeah, I guess, you know, you just kind of absorb all of that that negativity and negative thoughts and negative emotions, and, you know, eventually it's going to get the best of you. So yeah, it's interesting to me from the standpoint that, you know, Atris was the most vocal of the Jedi and casting us out from the Jedi Order in the first place, and then she ultimately is the one that, you know, fully turns and meets her end in that fashion.
Yeah, and it's just interesting because she had a holier than thou attitude the whole time about it. So it's just an interesting character arc. And if there were a college textbook about KOTOR 2, I would really love some analysis on Atris.
So that ties up our loose ends there with Atris, and that leaves us with one more stop here as we go through our endgame, and that is we are finally going to be confronting Darth Nihilus. We've seen Darth Nihilus a few times in some cutscenes and things like that, but we're finally going to be going face to face, toe to toe, mask to mask with Darth Nihilus. So all aboard the Ravager. We are headed up to board this thing. This is a really big ship, by the way, on a side note. And yeah, we're going to get there in our final confrontation. And we've got some kind of interesting things that happen. Mandalore is there. He says that I'm coming with you. I'm going to get the rest of the Mandalorians. They're going to come and help bring the ship down, but Canderous, Mandalore has to be in your party, so that's kind of fun. And Visas Mar, it's really important for her story because she is headed back to confront her old master.
Yeah, that's something interesting that KOTOR 2 does, is it kind of forces you to bring certain companions, like, throughout the game, and I think only, like, that only really happened in KOTOR 1 on Lihan when you go to the temple to confront Bastila. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's interesting. Mandalore, the preserver, helps you out, which kind of like... I mean, Nihilus was originally fighting against the Mandalorians, and now it's kind of like you kind of ordered a genocide, you know, like on the Mandalorians. Yep. And now you're fighting together, so...
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. It's a weird amalgamation of things, and I was going to talk about it a little bit. You know, we're talking about the atonement bits, but yeah, it's kind of all of these, like, threads of Mitra Surik's story are kind of coming together and getting intertwined on board the Ravager on this ship. So yeah, it's interesting that Mandalore is with you and the Mandalorians are going to help you here in this case. And it's interesting, like I said, that the Visas Mar is there, you know, to face off against her former master. And one of the things that the story does really well is Visas basically like checks herself out of your party, right? She's like, I'm gonna go over here, and you don't know if it's because she's meaning to betray you. You don't know what that means, and I think that that's really interesting. But, you know, basically she's just going to kind of meditate to think on what's going to be happening before she's going to confront her former master, and probably because she knows that he is a real bad dude.
Yeah, I mean, Nihilus, like, he doesn't really have much of a personality. He's more of a force of nature.
Mhm.
And you kind of like, he's just spooky. Um, and I always say Visus, but I think it's Visus. And she meditates and aids in breaking her bond with Nihilus. And then we kind of battle him, and it takes a while, but we defeat him.
Visas comes in and helps us with that, as she is able to kind of sever her ties with Darth Nihilus, which leaves him a little bit vulnerable, and we're able to defeat him. Let's talk a little bit about Darth Nihilus. Big fan favorite. Has the very spooky mask. Looks pretty cool. He's got himself a Black Series figure, which is neat.
Yeah.
Darth Nihilus, aka the Lord of Hunger, kind of got this way because he was on Malachor when the mass shadow generator went off, but he survived. So bad news there, because when you survive something like that, you're basically left as kind of this. Refer to it as like a wound in the Force, but I don't know. The only thing that can keep Nihilus alive now is basically consuming, or quote unquote eating Force energy. So you'll see a lot of times people will refer to Darth Nihilus as Planet Eater and stuff like that. And really, what he's doing is he's consuming all of the positive like Force energy from people, just very similar to what Malik was doing at the end of KOTOR, right? He was drawing on that Force energy from his prisoners there that was giving him strength. So kind of the next level iteration of that here for Darth Nihilus. And I wanted to make a little comparison here now. If you've been reading the High Republic in the first wave that came out, one of the main kind of threats to the Jedi were these things called the Levelers, which also literally just eats kind of the Force, the positive Force, the light side of the Force. It just kind of eats that, and they are controlled and used by the pirates, which are called the Nile. So is that a tie-in? Does that make Darth Nihilus canon? Not yet, but I have a feeling that it probably will at some point. But
Yeah.
When you're eating life force all day, every day, eventually you're not going to be able to eat enough, and you're going to have to put your soul into that spooky mask that you wear, and that's how you live on.
Yeah, the interesting thing about Darth Nihilus is it's kind of like when the mass shadow generator went off, like Mitra Surik became a wound in the Force, but so did Darth Nihilus. It's kind of like he's like a dark twin, dark shadow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. You have a lot of those kind of parallels between Mitra Surik and kind of these other companions and adversaries as you go through the story. And yeah, definitely kind of flip sides of the coin there, as both being kinds of these wounds of the Force. And then by creating Darth Nihilus, who then went on to KOTOR and ate all of the life force there, that left Visas Mar as the only survivor of that. So by doing that, by creating Darth Nihilus, you've also created Visas Mar as his apprentice, and you have basically eliminated the majority of the Jedi from the galaxy and sent the surviving ones scattered to the winds. So yeah, it's a lot of really kind of neat story bits about Mitra Surik's journey are coming to a head here aboard the ship.
Yeah, and it's kind of like there's all this unfinished business that you have to finish to get back to Malachor. So you have to go to Dugzan Onderon, you have to go to Dantooine, you have to go to Telos, you have to kind of like acknowledge like the problem that is Darth Nihilus. On the Ravager, he's kind of been spooky the whole game, but you have to finally do something about it.
That's right. Yeah, he's been spooky and speaking in whispers and things. So yeah, it's pretty neat as it comes to a head there. But fortunately, we are able to get the best of Darth Nihilus. We have eliminated that branch of the Sith, which just really leaves us, with a couple more things to iron out here as we get into the final section onto Malachor. But that's going to have to wait for another day because Malachor was kind of the birth of Mitra Surik in our story, and it's going to be the final piece. So we're going to save Malachor for its own separate episode. So let's just talk about the loose ends and the places that we went and kind of the lessons that we learned along the way, Cassia. But we're getting into the end game. What parts of Mitra Surik's atonement are we seeing here? Any correlation or parallels or really important lessons that you can see?
I think, kind of seeing someone finish their unfinished business shows responsibility and growth. And it would have been easy for her to be like, oh, Dug's and Onderon, General Falcu and Queen Talia can figure it out on their own. I don't care. For the most part, the Jedi Masters are like, we don't care.
Right, yeah.
And then, you kind of, go back to Dantooine, to the people that cut you off from the Force and, finishing, I guess, the cycle there. In a way, or attempting to, and then kind of Korea, kind of stops that, but she was facing it, and then, to go to Telos to try to stop Atris, who's been a foe, basically, since you left to go fight in the Mandalorian Wars, and try to put a stop to her, turning to the dark side, if we're playing the light side canonical path, the Darth Nihilus is kind of your dark twin who's been there since, the mass shadow generator went off and you became a wound in the Force, so I kind of see it as, she's kind of facing everything, that will really prepare her to kind of go to her deepest depths, her personal hell, which is Malachor.
Yeah, for sure. Very well said. Yeah, it's kind of the culmination of all of these storylines that are coming to a head here, which obviously makes sense from a story perspective, but really it's her having to face all of these kind of branching things that she's, either caused or turned her back on, or, was the insider of, all of this stuff, kind of in the belly of this beast of the Ravager. So I think that stuff is very interesting. I think that, Darth Nihilus could certainly be a parallel to the purgatory stage of gluttony, with his insatiable hunger, which I felt that was pretty obvious, and obviously being gluttonous and consuming all of this Force energy eventually led to his demise, and causes him to fracture off from his apprentice and meet his ultimate fate there. So yeah, I think that it's just really interesting as kind of all of these stories that we've been talking about as we've been going from place to place are finally coming to a head. And I think that KOTOR 2 does a really good job of, kind of tying this storyline up for us and, getting us really prepared to, like you said, going into Mitra's personal hell to Malachor. And that's where we're going to go next. But I think that's going to have to wait until next time, Cassia. We covered a lot of ground. We went to a lot of the galaxy today. But any closing thoughts on any of these last locations, or just about the locations of KOTOR in general before we sign off of this one?
Well, kind of comparing, our coverage of KOTOR 1, I was just kind of thinking about it, we were kind of, making, a treatment for a movie that's never going to happen. you know, and then kind of like we could go on for hours about KOTOR 1, you know, but with KOTOR 2, maybe it can kind of be a little bit more scary because it's kind of like a deeper, more philosophical game, but I think it's good that we're kind of just like covering it in short little bursts so like people aren't intimidated by it, but we're still covering everything. We're just not having like hour and 30-minute episodes, so we're more accessible, hopefully.
Yeah, absolutely. We really, just kind of on a personal, peek behind the Old Republic podcast curtain, we really were not sure how we wanted to handle KOTOR 2 because, it seemed to us very obviously that, and you'd actually started, before I came on board, Cassia, of treating the First Knights of the Old Republic game as a film. But KOTOR 2 is so much more philosophical and, kind of asking, the listener, the viewer, the person being told the story, the game player, to really meet it, almost more than halfway in some instances, and kind of draw your own conclusions and how you feel about things and how you think that the characters would feel about things. And I think that doing these little travel logs has been kind of a good exploration of that very loosely, from a standpoint of covering the game and the locations and getting a little bit of an introduction into the characters. But I think that there's still definitely some good stories to tell about KOTOR 2. We're going to have to get into, maybe do a little bit deeper dives on some characters and sort of their individual journeys. Maybe we'll have to incorporate some hero's journey or heroine's journey into our KOTOR 2 storytelling, because that's something that we definitely like to do. But yeah, this ride and these travel logs are not over. Like I said, we have one more stop to make at Malachor before we finish off the KOTOR 2 game anyways. And then, we'll be back to chat about some more stuff about KOTOR 2. But let us know, I guess, if you have any thoughts about what you would like to see from KOTOR 2, be it a movie, be it a book, be it a tone poem or an ice capade with Kreia. Let us know how you think KOTOR 2 should be covered or adapted, and maybe we'll have to talk about that. We'll take all ideas and probably run with them.
Yeah. So until next time, may the Force be with you.